America in 2020 wasn't witnessing a democratic election. It was watching a masterclass in mass manipulation. A sitting president, presiding over 400,000 dead Americans, mass unemployment, and social upheaval, came within 43,000 votes across 3 states of remaining in power. This wasn't democracy functioning. This was democracy being gamed. But here's what the establishment doesn't want you to understand. Trump's near victory wasn't despite the chaos. It was because of how that chaos was framed. Every crisis became a narrative opportunity. Every failure became someone else's fault. Every truth became negotiable. This is the lens we bring to power, exposing not just what happened, but how you were told it happened. Because in America, reality is less important than the story about reality. And those who control the story control everything. Chapter 1. The Incumbency Illusion: How Power Protects Itself. First, let's destroy the myth of incumbency advantage being natural. When media talks about incumbency advantage, they present it as if it's just another campaign resource, like having more volunteers or better funding. This is false equivalence at its most insidious. Incumbency isn't an advantage. It's systemic power. Trump didn't just have a campaign. He had the entire executive branch as his campaign apparatus. He turned the White House into a rally stage. He weaponized federal agencies for photo ops. He used Air Force One as a campaign bus funded by your tax dollars. The media constantly repeated, "Incumbents usually win." But this creates survivorship bias. We only see the incumbents who won, not the structural reasons why they won. It's like saying lottery winners usually buy tickets while ignoring that millions of ticket buyers never win. Consider the concrete advantages Trump wielded. Used the White House South Lawn for his GOP convention speech. Estimated value $2.8 million in free venue costs. Deployed federal agents to Portland for campaign footage. Spending taxpayer money for political theater. Held 14 official White House events in swing states during his final campaign month. Used Air Force One for 40-plus campaign-related trips. Cost to taxpayers $17 million. Here's where it gets sinister. Every time a network showed Trump using the Rose Garden for campaign events, every time they aired his official presidential addresses that were really campaign speeches, they normalized the abuse of office. They treated the corruption of democratic norms as just Tuesday. Specific examples of media enabling. CNN aired Trump's Mount Rushmore speech live, giving him $3 million in free advertising for what was clearly a campaign event. Networks showed his Hurricane Laura briefing where he spent more time attacking Biden than discussing disaster relief. Fox News broadcast his law enforcement roundtable that was actually a campaign rally with badges. MSNBC covered his infrastructure announcement that contained zero infrastructure content and 30 minutes of campaign rhetoric. The frame became, "That's just Trump being Trump." No, that was authoritarianism being normalized, one presidential podium at a time. Chapter 2. The Weaponization of Identity, Manufacturing Tribal Loyalty. Trump didn't run a political campaign in 2020. He ran a cult recruitment operation. Every Trump rally followed the same psychological script. 1. You are under attack. 2. They are the attackers. 3. I am your protector. This is textbook false dichotomy, reducing complex policy questions to binary tribal choices. But it goes deeper. This is emotional manipulation designed to bypass rational thought entirely. Here's the twisted genius. Trump convinced the most powerful demographic in American history, white conservatives, that they were victims. This is the victimhood paradox, claiming persecution while wielding power. The specific manipulation: they're coming for your guns, while his Supreme Court appointees expanded gun rights in Bruin decision. They hate your values, while conservatives controlled 30 state legislatures and the entire federal judiciary. They want to silence you, while Fox News reached 2.9 million viewers nightly and conservative content dominated Facebook engagement. They're destroying Christmas, while Christians comprise 65% of the population and Christmas was a federal holiday. They're replacing you, while white Americans owned 85% of U.S. wealth and held 90% of Fortune 500 CEO positions. Watch the psychological sleight of hand. Statistical dominance becomes cultural persecution. Economic power becomes spiritual oppression. Political control becomes existential threat. Networks couldn't resist the spectacle. CNN, MSNBC, even CBS. They aired these rallies because outrage drives ratings. But every minute of airtime was free campaign advertising for Trump's psychological manipulation. The damning specifics. CNN gave Trump $2 billion in free media during 2016, then repeated the pattern in 2020. Cable networks aired 72 Trump rallies live in their entirety during the final campaign year. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow showed 18-minute uninterrupted segments of Trump rally footage while analyzing it. Even when networks added chyrons saying Trump makes false claims, they still broadcast the claims to millions. They became unwitting accomplices in mass hypnosis, broadcasting tribal programming to millions while pretending it was just covering the news. The networks knew exactly what they were doing. Les Moonves, then CBS CEO, admitted in 2016, "It may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS." The confession couldn't be clearer. Chapter 3. The Racial Dog Whistle Symphony, White Supremacy in Suits. Let's call this what it actually was: a white supremacist campaign with better marketing. When Trump screamed about protecting the suburbs, this wasn't policy, and this was euphemistic labeling. Suburbs meant white spaces. Protection meant segregation. Law and order meant crushing dissent. The specific coded messages: suburban housewives equals white women afraid of racial integration. Protect property values equals maintain housing segregation. Neighborhood character equals demographic exclusion. Safety and security equals police occupation of black communities. American values equals white cultural dominance. Heritage preservation equals Confederate monument protection. The straw man arguments were surgical. Biden wants to eliminate the suburbs. He proposed housing affordability measures. Democrats want to defund police entirely. They proposed reallocating portions of budgets to social services. They want open borders. No major Democrat advocated eliminating border security. They're teaching kids to hate America. Schools taught historical facts about racism. Here's the evil genius of dog whistles. They give plausible deniability to racism. When called out, supporters can say, "He just wants law and order," while everyone knows exactly what law and order means when black people are protesting. This is coded language at its most sophisticated, maintaining racist intent while providing rhetorical cover. The most damaging media failure wasn't amplifying Trump. It was the reflexive both sides framing that treated white supremacist dog whistles as legitimate political discourse. Watch how major outlets sanitized racism. CNN. Trump appeals to suburban voters with safety message. Reality. Trump uses racial fear-mongering. NBC. Candidates differ on law enforcement approach. Reality. One side advocates police reform, other advocates police state. New York Times. Trump and Biden offer competing visions of America. Reality. One vision includes all Americans, other excludes black and brown Americans. Washington Post. Both parties energize base voters with cultural appeals. Reality. One side energizes through inclusion, other through white grievance. Some say law and order is about safety, others say it's racial coding. No, one side is lying. One side is using fascist rhetoric, but acknowledging that would require media to take a position, and taking positions doesn't maximize shareholder value. Chapter 4. Manufacturing Alternative Reality. Trump didn't just lie about the election, he engineered a complete epistemic breakdown. This wasn't random misinformation. It was the big lie technique straight from authoritarian playbooks. Repeat a massive lie so often that people start believing it, not because it's true, but because they can't imagine someone would lie about something so big so consistently. Trump's specific disinformation timeline. April 2020. Mail-in ballots are fraudulent. Months before knowing results. July 2020. The only way we lose is if it's rigged. Preemptive excuse for potential loss. September 2020. Get rid of the ballots and there won't be a transfer. Rejecting democracy itself. November 3rd, 11:20 p.m. We did win this election, while votes still being counted. November 4th. December 14th, repeated stolen election 500 plus times on social media. The preemptive framing was surgical. Months before Election Day, Trump was already claiming fraud. This is psychological conditioning. When delays in counting happened, as they always do, his base was already primed to see conspiracy. The genius was making normal election processes seem suspicious. Mail-in voting became fraud, actually increases security through paper trails. Vote counting after Election Day became suspicious, actually standard procedure. Statistical analysis became proof of manipulation, actually proof of normal patterns. Classic authoritarian move. Trump made wild claims, then demanded others prove them wrong. This is burden of proof reversal. The accuser becomes the prosecutor, forcing democracy itself to prove its legitimacy. Prove there was no fraud. Impossible demand. You can't prove a negative. But the demand itself suggests guilt, contaminating the entire process. Here's the media's most devastating failure. They thought they could fact-check their way out of fascism. The damaging headlines that repeated lies while debunking them. CNN. Trump claims without evidence that mail-in voting leads to fraud. NBC. Trump alleges ballot harvesting in Pennsylvania. Experts disagree. ABC. President says dead people voted. Officials find no proof. CBS. Trump points to voting irregularities. Courts reject claims. Every fact check repeated the lie. The human brain remembers Trump claims mail-in voting leads to fraud, not without evidence. The specific feedback loops. Trump lies, media amplifies while correcting. Lie spreads further. Trump leverages coverage. Media covers the controversy. Lie becomes legitimate topic of debate. Media created an information laundering system. Trump lies, media amplifies while correcting. Lie spreads further. Trump leverages coverage. Media covers the controversy. Lie becomes legitimate topic of debate. They became amplifiers for the very disinformation they claim to combat. Chapter 5. The coup attempt, when rhetoric becomes violence. January 6th wasn't an aberration. It was the logical conclusion of everything we've analyzed. Trump spent months using stochastic terrorism, rhetoric designed to inspire violence without explicitly calling for it. The specific escalation pattern. June 2020. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. August 2020. The only way they can take this election is if this is a rigged election. October 2020. Liberate Michigan, weeks before kidnap and plot against governor. December 2020. Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there will be wild. January 6th, 1 p.m. Fight like hell or you won't have a country anymore. Each phrase had plausible deniability. Fight could be metaphorical. Liberate could mean voting. Shooting could mean criticism. But the cumulative message was unmistakable to his audience. This is stochastic terrorism. You don't tell someone to commit violence. You create conditions where violence becomes inevitable and let statistics do the work. Some percentage of your audience will always interpret implied calls to action as literal instructions. Even during a literal coup attempt, Trump maintained the victim frame. They stole the election from us. The insurrectionists became the real patriots. Democracy defenders became the real threat. This is victimhood inversion, portraying aggressors as victims and victims as aggressors. Even after January 6th, media fell back into horse race coverage within weeks. Can Trump make a comeback? Became a normal question to ask about someone who attempted a coup. The specific normalization timeline, January 7th to 20th. Unprecedented attack on democracy. February 2021, Trump's impeachment trial begins. March 2021, Trump remains popular with base voters. June 2021, Trump teases. 2024 comeback. September 2021, Trump leads GOP primary polling. January 2022. Can anyone stop Trump in 2024? Within 1 year, attempted coup became campaign strategy. Insurrection became political theater. Sedition became energizing the base. Major outlets treated Trump's 2024 campaign announcement as normal political news. CNN. Trump announces 2024 presidential campaign. NBC. Former president launches third White House bid. Washington Post. Trump enters crowded Republican field. Not one mentioned he'd attempted to overthrow the government 22 months earlier. This isn't journalism. It's amnesia as a business model. Chapter 6. The deeper pathology. Why this works. The real question isn't how Trump nearly won, it's why millions of Americans were susceptible to this manipulation in the first place. American media isn't accidentally broken, it's working exactly as designed. It's a profit maximization system disguised as an information system. Outrage drives engagement. Engagement drives revenue. Truth is irrelevant if it doesn't pay. Trump exploited specific psychological weaknesses. Confirmation bias. People believe information that confirms existing beliefs. Availability. Heuristic. Recent memorable events feel more probable. Loss aversion. Fear of losing status motivates more than hope of gaining it. In-group loyalty. Tribal belonging trumps objective truth. None of this happens in a democracy with media literacy education, campaign finance limits, electoral systems that represent actual majorities, social media platforms designed for truth instead of engagement. America has none of these safeguards. By design. Chapter 7. The ongoing threat, why it's getting worse. Trump lost in 2020, but Trumpism won. The rhetorical infrastructure remains. Every technique we've analyzed is still operational. False victimhood narratives, racial dog whistles, disinformation networks, media complicity, structural advantages. The escalation pattern. Each election cycle, the rhetoric gets more extreme because the previous level stops working. Desensitization requires escalation. Watch the specific progression. 2016. Bad hombres and rapists and drug dealers. 2018. Caravan invasion and Middle Eastern terrorists. 2020. They're destroying our suburbs and American carnage. 2022. Poisoning the blood of our country. 2024. They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. The pattern. Each lie has to be more outrageous than the last to break through the noise of the previous lies. We went from economic competition to demographic threat to blood contamination to literal cannibalism. Each escalation tests what the audience will accept, then pushes further. This is Fascist Rhetoric 101. Start with reasonable-sounding concerns, then gradually normalize increasingly dehumanizing language until genocide becomes thinkable. The democratic collapse accelerates. Media has learned nothing. They're still chasing ratings through both sidesism. They're still treating fascist rhetoric as political strategy. They're still platforming liars in the name of balance. This analysis isn't academic, it's survival instruction. Once you see these techniques, you can't unsee them. False dichotomies that eliminate nuanced thinking. Emotional manipulation that bypasses rational analysis. Victimhood narratives that justify aggression. Preemptive framing that controls interpretation. Burden of proof reversal that weaponizes skepticism. The media literacy imperative. Every technique we've exposed is being used right now by politicians, corporations, and media institutions alike. They depend on your inability to recognize manipulation. The democratic requirement. Democracy isn't a spectator sport. It requires active, informed participation. But first, it requires seeing through the lies designed to make participation impossible. Because here's the truth they don't want you to understand. Informed citizens are the only threat to illegitimate power. That's why they work so hard to keep you uninformed and misinformed. There is a conspiracy in America. It's not hidden. It's right in front of you. It's the conspiracy to make you believe that. Both sides are equally valid. Truth is a matter of opinion. Expertise doesn't matter. Feeling is more important than fact. Your voice doesn't matter. That's the conspiracy. And your ability to see through it is the only thing standing between democracy and its destruction. Trump's near re-election wasn't a political event. It was a diagnostic test of American democracy. We failed that test. The question now is whether we'll learn from the failure or keep pretending it was just another election. Because the next test is coming, and the manipulators are getting better at their craft. The choice is yours. Remain a subject of manipulation or become a citizen capable of seeing through it. Everything depends on which you choose. This is why we shine light on power's darkest corners. Because democracy dies in darkness, but it also dies in the artificial light of manufactured reality. Keep your eyes open, Question everything, trust but verify, and remember, they can only control you if you let them.